Hello, everyone. Welcome to the finale. We made it. All right, can we get, yes, Justin, thank you for closing the doors. Well, my name is Lauren Spohn, and I am a PhD student in philosophical theology at the University of Oxford, as well as a filmmaker. And I have the pleasure of actually working on two projects with two of our panelists this afternoon. But most importantly, and most relevant for our purposes today, I have the great honor of chairing our last panel on the practice of Catholic filmmaking. So we've heard a bit about the theory of the Catholic filmmaker earlier today, and the whole weekend we've been thinking about the Catholic imagination. So now, right before our feet hit the road to leave Notre Dame, the rubber will hit the road, and we'll talk about the actual practice of putting together Catholic films. So a quick roadmap for this session. We're going to start off with having each of our panelists introduce themselves and show you a bit of their work. And then from there, we're going to conduct our discussion by showing a clip from one of our panelists, and then followed by about 10 to 15 minutes of just discussion among ourselves. And then for the last 20 or so minutes, we'll open it up to Q&A. So do please have in the back of your mind some questions you'd be willing to ask. And we'll try to wrap up promptly around 3:30 because we have Mass at 5. And of all things, this we cannot be late to.
That means 4:30.
Well, you know, yeah. Thank you, Tim. Without further ado, I'll hand it over to Elizabeth.
Great. Thank you all for being here. I don't know if I need my mic.
You do.
Okay. So thank you all for being here. We're going to just talk a little bit about our journeys into filmmaking. My journey began with a Polaroid camera that my parents gave me for Christmas one year. And honestly, ever since I was a kid, I had a real anxiety and almost an obsession with time. And like trying to understand time, trying to capture time, trying to stop time. And this has followed me all the way into adulthood. So I was just photographing everything around the family. I had a pet frog. I have many photos of my pet frog dressed in a ballerina costume. But from there, I went on to study photography in university. And then my mom got sick in 2006. She was diagnosed with terminal cancer. And I felt at that point like photography just wasn't going to be quite enough to capture or stop or slow down time. And so I picked up a video camera for the first time. Unlike pretty much all my friends, I had no videos of me as a kid. My family never had a video camera. We had nothing exists until college. And so I started to just film her and also make home movies with my friends. And then she passed away in 2006. And shortly after, I moved to Afghanistan and I taught photography over there. I met my husband as well. And we decided we wanted to work together, and photography is not super collaborative. So we thought, let's try to make films. We're really fortunate and blessed to have an amazing mentor, a documentary director who happened to be traveling in Afghanistan and taught us a lot about filmmaking. We made a couple short films for Al Jazeera, and then that's me in the middle there in the black. And then I just started to DP a lot of other people's projects and films. And we started to, it's like an amazing privilege to be able to document these moments of people's lives and their great joy and their great sorrow as well. And it's something really sacred, I think, as a documentary filmmaker, that you are witnessing these moments and you have to really interrogate yourself to think about what that means. We directed two features. Our first feature was Layla at the Bridge, which is about a woman in Afghanistan who was helping people addicted to heroin who live under a bridge in Kabul. And we did a big festival run with that film, and that was really our just baptism by fire into the world of feature doc making. And then our short film, 3 Songs for Benazir, took us about over 5 years to make. We had no funding, so that's part of why it took a really long time. And then that film went on to be picked up by Netflix, and it was nominated for an Academy Award in 2022 for Best Documentary Short. So we went to the Oscars, my husband and I, and he was the first person from Afghanistan ever nominated as well. And it was like an amazing experience, but also very surreal because at the same time we're walking this red carpet and Afghanistan the government had just collapsed. We were, it was incredibly stressful. We were trying to get my mother-in-law, his mom evacuated, other family evacuated. It was just around the clock working. She actually did end up getting here. She's here now. And this last picture is just from our last film called Natalia, which we'll show a trailer from. But we did a festival run with that film, and this is me with the Dominican nuns and one of my kids at the Nashville Film Festival. And it was, we toured many festivals, but it was amazing. This was, I think, one of the first where we had actually a religious people, like in a religious vocation at the festival. So we are right now working on our first fiction project together, a short.
Hi, everybody. My name's Tim Reckart. I am the animation guy on the panel, and I don't know if it would also be true to say that I'm the Hollywood guy in the panel. I got started because I liked movies like The Matrix and Indiana Jones and stuff like that, and I'm one of 6 kids. We kind of big Catholic family in Arizona. We used to take a bottle of ketchup out into the desert and film ourselves killing each other, and that was really where I caught the bug. I found my way into animation sort of unexpectedly and really by the grace of God, just with strange coincidences when I was an undergrad, and I went to graduate school, and there I animated and directed my sort of debut animated short called Head Over Heels, which went on to get an Oscar nomination, which was really the thing that kicked off my career. So I had, this is my favorite photo because I'm there, Catwoman is there, Wolverine is there, Denzel Washington's up at the, anyway, it was amazing to be there, very surreal, especially because I felt like I had nothing to talk to these people about, so I deliberately avoided them at the party. But then I went on to direct a film called The Star at Sony Animation. This is a nativity. The whole conceit is really fun and obvious in a way, and it's amazing that it hadn't been done before, but the whole idea was like, let's do the nativity story from the point of view of the animals in the nativity set. So what did the animals think was going on? And it was a great way to make a comedic, entertaining vehicle to tell the story of the first Christmas. And in the years since, I've done projects at DreamWorks and Netflix. But the new latest thing is that I've spent the last year setting up a new independent studio, which is dedicated to making good, true, and beautiful animated films for families around the world. So the next step is finding ways to lean harder into what God is calling me and my partners in the company to do in the film industry, not just sort of survive in the film industry, but really kind of find a way to put just the advantages that our Lord has given us, put those to work for Him. We aren't a faith-based company, but we think there's a lot that we can do, and in fact, it's something that we'll talk about in this panel, a lot that we can do as Christians in film without necessarily dealing with sacred subjects. I'm sure that's one of the things we'll be talking about.
Hello, everyone. My name is Schiavolin, and a little bit about me. Let's see, what do I got here? This is not relevant to what I'm about to tell you. It's coming up, but that is me. I grew up, I had a really rich childhood experience. By the time I was 14, I had lived 17, like 13 different places. In Europe, Asia, South America, all over the southern United States. And so I was deeply fascinated with culture, expressions of culture, deeply moved. That's sort of the lens that I saw and what intrigued me in life. My mom, we were Catholic, and my mom instilled a prayer life in me at a very early age. They kind of helped me deal with, when you're small, you help you deal with a lot of sort of scary things, right? Putting the universe into a certain order. And so 17, I had been in all these places, but I didn't have any roots, right? I was very rich and very poor in the sort of social developmental perspective. And then the last day of my high school career, my brother, my only sibling, the only consistent person in my life outside my parents, like a peer person, died in a car accident. And so I go off to college. I was born in New Orleans. I had an idea of what New Orleans was, but I had moved like just a year after and then all over the world. I went back to New Orleans to kind of explore, like intuitively, maybe that'd be a good place to go to see where my roots are. And I loved it there. I decided to study, to study philosophy and psychology. And by the time it came to declare my major, I should also say that I spent my more time studying the jazz scene in New Orleans in the evenings, and then just kind of doing the obligatory classes. But by the time it came to declare my major, I couldn't bear the idea of continuing in these schools, one of which was completely soulless, I interpreted, and then one was kind of half soulless. They had they had some good philosophy professors, and others weren't that good. Not to say that I was fully grounded in my faith. I was very poorly catechized, but and so I happened to have a roommate who I was acting in his classes, his production classes, right? And I had a lot of fun, and it brought back these memories of me as a young boy in England, just sort of an expat, a refugee. I mean, sort of lamenting that I had been extracted from the United States into this foreign country, and making films about American films. A lot of those Hollywood type films. I was a lover of those films too. But so filmmaking fit me. It became a place where that I could explore my interests. It can explore my a form where I could integrate all of these ideas, philosophy, psychology, and so forth. So I graduated. I worked for an advertising agency, and then I went to Austin. And well, I guess we can just change the picture here. That's a short film that I worked on in Austin, where it's very much this is a music scene that's taking place in it, and that's what I was doing in Austin. I was doing music. I felt like I had a passion for music, and so I was doing live music, and music videos and stuff, and that turned into a documentary on a very good friend of mine in the music scene, a jazz organist who moved to Germany to pursue his career there. And then from there, I should say, before I moved to Austin, it was like 2000 Jubilee year, I had a real reversion to the faith. And I knew that I belonged there, right? This is after like 4 years of college, where I'm kind of just pursuing truth in every single crevice of everything. So, and pretty recklessly. But it wasn't until I had graduated and I realized, maybe I didn't envision that I would sort of be here, nursing a hangover on my couch, watching football in the mornings at this stage of my life. And my parents had retired to Austin. I went to Austin, and And so I became I dove deeply into my faith after grappling, like after a stage of like realizing, okay, this is the truth, this is where this is home, but how the hell do you integrate this into everyday life? How do I live knowing with these two, like live it within this dichotomy of the social spheres and cultures? And so I got married to a theologian, and we fell in love because of John, because we loved like exploring the faith, right? We met at a John Paul II retreat, and I was like, oh man, she's like super smart, and I could just talk to her forever, and so that became a real facet of my life. And then in 2014, a dream project landed on my lap, and I was asked to make a documentary series for a Vatican conference called the Humanum Conference on the Complementarity of Man and Woman. And then that happened. I know I'm running long on this introduction.
Yeah.
But and then this other film I did recently. It's called She Was Stronger, exploring the lives of 3 women who left the abortion industries. And let's see. And then I most recently made a film that premiered at Tribeca Film Festival about the story of Troy Kotsur and his dad. Troy Kotsur is the Academy Award-winning actor for his role in Coda, 2022. He got on stage and dedicated the award to his father, and shared that his father was his hero. He was the best signer in the family. He met him where he was. He gave him what he needed to follow his spark in life, in his dad's terms. And he happened to be deeply Catholic. And so I got to share that story. And I'll share a clip of that with you guys here.
Awesome. Okay, great. Well, thank you guys so much. We're going to kick off the discussion portion of the panel now. And we thought that the best place to begin our conversation would be with the question of what is the vocation of a Catholic filmmaker? Does it involve more than just filming Catholic subjects? Does it involve more than thinking about the forms? Or how is it integrate the form of film and I suppose the Platonic forms? Take your pick. So to kick off this topic, we're going to start with a trailer for Elizabeth's most recent short documentary. And has anyone, feature doc, thank you. Has anyone seen the interview on Pints with Aquinas with Mother Natalia by chance? Count on Justin. So this is Natalia as she is discerning her vocation. So with that, if we could get the lights, please.
Ready, set, go. Savannah's it. I mean, Rosewood. Fuzzy's it. So here's the thing. I really love men, and I really love babies. And so I thought, surely I'm not called to the monastic life.
Anybody can live this life for 3 to 5 years. What you need to ask yourself is, can you do this for the rest of your life?
Basically, I'm going to promise that I'll never mess up again. Like, how can I say yes to that knowing that I'm lying in my yes?
Great. So, Elizabeth, if you could kick us off just by sharing some thoughts about the making of the film and any reflections it may have given you about the vocation of the Catholic filmmaker.
Yeah, well, the film was really challenging to make because it's not a traditional documentary in the sense that there's not like an external antagonist. The journey is very much internal, this journey of discernment. So we really had to find ways to use the language of cinema to be able to get inside Natalia's world. And part of that just involved like what I would focus on, any kind of ways to access her internal space, as well as the use of sound design. But it was a film I think we really kind of wrote in the edit. I edited it along with another editor. The two of us worked together. It was an incredible process. I will say I don't consider myself a Catholic filmmaker. I'm a filmmaker and I am Catholic as well. But I wouldn't put those two together to identify myself. I think it's a really interesting question about the vocation of cinema, because I think growing up, I had heard like there's only 3 real vocations in life. It's the single life, the married life, or the religious life. But I think when you look beyond that, and John and Henry Newman talked about like it's beyond the state in life. There's also this idea that every person is called to a kind of work committed to them alone that is not committed to anyone else in the world. And I think that certainly can extend to making films. As a filmmaker, I feel my responsibility is really to the truth. I think any good film or any good story, regardless of what faith background it comes from, always has a kind of element of the truth. And how do we get to that truth? I think about the poet Rumi, who talked about, I'm going to paraphrase, but it was like you need to close your eyes and then see with the eyes of your heart. And I think as Catholics, we understand that so much because we understand that you can see with the eyes and ears of faith. And so when you do see that, I think it just opens up all these other layers of mystery in the world around us, and that films are as much about as what we do see as what we don't see.
Tim, Sean?
Yeah, I want to push back in a way that I hope will result in what my friends call something that I do a lot, having a heated agreement with you.
Just for the record,
Elizabeth.
pushback means to object. Yeah.
Right. I'll just start with my disagreement. I think we should identify ourselves as Catholic filmmakers, but I also understand, having kind of been there myself, why a lot of people feel reluctance to do this. And I frequently hear something along the lines of, well, a Catholic filmmaker is like a Catholic plumber or a Catholic electrician. And I'm Catholic and I'm an electrician, but the electrician work is not Catholic. It's just done well, and I offer it to God, and this is, my altar is the circuit board, and that's what I do, and I think that that's true for a lot of jobs like that. But I think that there are jobs and crafts or professional vocations, let's say, where there just is more scope for preaching the gospel with our work. And filmmakers aren't unique here. I mean, I think I would say the same about novelists and teachers, and essentially I think that our vocation as Christians is rooted in the Great Commission, which is to preach the gospel to all nations and make disciples of all nations, baptizing in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. And now, we know that doesn't mean that that's the only kind of speech that we can have, but it does mean that at some level that's, like, even when we're talking about other things, that is what we have been given life for. And I think our vocation, again, as Christians, is to be saints, and everyone here would agree with me there. But what I think that means to give 100% of our life to God where He's put us. And so for us as filmmakers, it's to give 100% of my life to God in film, in making films, and as a father and as a mother and whatever else is going on. But so then this thing that can feel like a burden, that's like, yeah, but I don't want it to limit my commitment to the truth, and my commitment to the truth is like, at some level, sort of agnostic and independent of my, let's say, tribal affiliation as a Catholic. But the nice thing about being a Catholic, universal Christian, is that every truth in the world that's true belongs to us anyway, by virtue of our faith. So I think there is really no contradiction, where sometimes it can feel like there might be. And so then why, look, if they're kind of one and the same thing, I'm a truthful filmmaker, was what I'm saying is, I'm a truthful filmmaker is the same as saying I'm a Catholic filmmaker. But I think that it's helpful, nevertheless, to embrace our Catholic identity, because, and now there's a point in The Way by St. Josemaria where he talks about the burden borne by a bird. The wings of a bird are a burden that the bird carries around no matter where he goes, but without bearing that burden, the bird can't soar in the sky. And that's how I like to think of the Catholic identity, that yes, it's at some level, we were talking last night, the filmmakers had I don't know if it was a heated agreement, that might have been a heated disagreement about sex scenes in films, but there are things that we can't do because God has commanded us to be perfect, and we can't sin. It's possible to sin as a filmmaker, so there are things that we can't do, but that can be experienced as a burden, or we can see that burden as something that if we lean into it, I think that's what really can make us soar as artists and give us something unique and different to say that, at the most sort of cynical level, will make us more successful and unique in the space.
So one wing being faith, the other reason, and then the wind of the Holy Spirit. There you go.
Yeah, nice.
Sean.
Well, I would put it in terms of what do we want to do with our films, right? What are we doing with our films, or as an artist, what are we trying to create? And I think that comes from the deepest part of who we are, and so our expression, right, is naturally an expression of what we believe, and I think so. I do agree with you to a certain degree, and I understand where you're coming from, Elizabeth, right? I think I had a debate with. I was talking to my wife after the Newman panel today about disagreeing, Newman saying, was Newman saying falsely that oh shoot, you were there. Anyway, is James Joyce a Catholic writer, right, or is he a Catholic lyrist, right? And on one side, it's no, I'm not sure what his argument was, but I kind of disagreed with it. But my argument was what I just articulated. If the artist is, he is embedded and encapsulated in what he produces.
Yeah, can I jump in?
Yeah.
That's why I really like the question that you're setting us up with, Lauren, which is, what is the vocation of the Catholic filmmaker, rather than what I think are much harder questions, like what is a Catholic film, or what is a Catholic filmmaker? Because to your point, Sean, we can learn a lot from lapsed Catholics, and Dana Gioia puts in his Catholic Writer today that great Catholic writers need not be great Catholics, but they do need to be great writers, and that's certainly true in film as well. And my favorite, the most Catholic film I can think of, two of them, neither one is made by a practicing Catholic, but those would be Children of Men and Mad Max Fury Road, and I know that latter one might surprise people here, but I think there's a lot of really interesting parallels with theology of the body, and I've done a whole podcast on it, so I won't do any of that with you guys, with Thomas Mirzaei's Catholic Culture podcast, by the way, to shout out for that. But so that's why what is the vocation of a Catholic filmmaker, i.e. what should we be doing with our careers and the gifts God has given us? Well, I can learn from George Miller and Alfonso Cuarón and a lot of people who aren't necessarily coming from there, but because I'm Catholic, I'm seeing a lot of resonance in those films with, what I believe.
Elizabeth, do you want to, close
yeah,
out?
I really appreciate this dialogue. You guys do. I think I had read Flannery O'Connor did not see herself as a Catholic writer, and I think for me it's like this idea that it's not separate. It's not like your faith and your art are separate from each other, because it's like it permeates everything you do, just like you can't divorce yourself from your childhood experiences. Like they shape you, they shape kind of the lens that you see the world through. So I think the same is true for faith or lack of faith. So that's more what I was. Yeah.
No, that's great. And another quick plug for the work of Nathan Douglas, who was a panelist earlier this morning, who's been doing a lot of brilliant writing about the vocation of the Catholic filmmaker. So you can look that up and find his
vocation
Substack.
of cinema and Substack.
Awesome. Well, to put Tim's theory to the test, we're gonna transition now into seeing a clip from his Oscar-nominated short. And maybe a good question is Children of Men more Catholic than The Star? This is maybe a good stress tester for his theory. So with that, let's grab the lights, and here we go.
Leave that on a cliffhanger. There's another 8 minutes to the movie, but it's on YouTube. The thing I wanted to see if we could get into, just jumping off of this clip, is in Dana Gioia's essay, The Catholic Writer Today, he has a paragraph which is like just pure gold for people like us, where he lists aspects of the Catholic imagination. He talks about sin, redemption, among other things, the sacramental imagination, or the idea that redemption comes to us through concrete things. We have that through the sacraments. It's also very biblical. I love the moment where Jesus cures the blind man by spitting into dirt and rubbing the dirt on the man's eyes. It's just so sacramental. And it's what we do as filmmakers. It's a photographic medium. It's an art form of objects. The beautiful thing about your film, Natalia, Elizabeth, is that you have to tell a spiritual story by pointing a camera at things that reflect light. You can't photograph her spiritual journey. So we have to find signs of that journey, and that's totally a sacramental challenge. And so the advantage that I have in animation, even over what people have as fiction live action filmmakers, is that everything in an animated film is designed and built. And so, for example, in that clip, the whole thing is symbolic of a married couple who've kind of gone off the rails, and it's even based on a pun. It's a couple that can't agree which way is up, right? So, but one of the ways that we found to tell the story very efficiently is with that wedding photograph that's hanging on the wall, and it's a very quick, succinct visual way to show they're in disagreement about this, and each one wants to kind of possess the right to define the marriage, and they're kind of having a little passive-aggressive tug of war about that. But that prop, it's like, there are lots of ways to do that, but one of the challenges in this movie is there's no dialogue, and so we had to find visual ways to characterize these characters, and that was a really nice way to do it, where you could have had an argument over the dinner table, but we did it with this prop. It also makes me think of if you'll just indulge me to describe one of my favorite pieces of one of my favorite movies, Jurassic Park. Early on in that movie, if you remember, they all get in a helicopter to Jurassic Park, and Dr. Grant sits down and he realizes his seatbelt is screwed up because he's got like part A and part A of the seatbelt. So this seatbelt does not latch, right? And so he ties it in a knot around his waist. So why is that in the movie? There are 3 things that's doing, and all of them are awesome. So one of them is you're seeing like Dr. Grant's a guy that solves problems. And that's great, so some character development. Another thing you're seeing, it's foreshadowing that Jurassic Park is a bit of a you-know-what show. Like, they have not worked out all the kinks, and that is what's gonna happen indeed when they get there. Like, the kind of company that has a helicopter with 2 female parts is the kind of company that's gonna have the security go down and the dinosaurs go haywire. But the third thing that only hit me like 2 or 3 years ago, and maybe that makes me an idiot, maybe you guys all know this, but I hope I'll blow some minds, is that, just to restate it, Dr. Grant has 2 female parts to his seatbelt, and they don't go together, but he still finds a way, right? Because you remember, all the dinosaurs at Jurassic Park are female, right? But he finds a way, and just as the female dinosaurs find a way to lay eggs. So mind-blowing kind of thing, and I love this symbol, but it's only in fiction film can you kind of organize something so elegant and succinct. So the question I have now, having done my little rhapsody there, I would love to hear from Elizabeth and Sean, because you guys have done so much work in documentary, and I know that even though it's more challenging, it's still available to you to find images and objects that seem to sort of get imbued with the meaning of the movie. So I would just love to hear about your process for finding the key totems to your movie,
Do you want to go first? I can jump in if you want.
Sure.
Okay.
Go first.
That's a great question. I think for me, a lot of it's intuitive. Because I shot the film as well, so it's like I just kind of follow what I'm drawn to, and I kind of find that in the edit. And one thing I found in the edit was there was a lot of threads. Like, there was the thread of actually sewing the Vlaschnitsa, the gown that she wears during her life profession, which is it's the gown that they're baptized, the one thing that their profession is, but also that it's going to be the gown that they're buried in. So it's this idea of the life profession as being both a burial and a resurrection. And so that thought was in my head the whole time. And I think for me, as a documentary filmmaker, I really start out with asking a question. And so and the question is usually not answered. I don't think it's the job of a filmmaker to answer questions. I think it's the job of us to ask them. And so my question that I was asking in this film was, what does it mean to die? And that question really just informed everything I was drawn to, everything I gravitated to. And so this thread, I don't want to explain what it means because I want it to be left up to interpretation, but I just noticed things like that throughout the film, that on an intuitive level, I was gravitating towards them, as you say, as these symbols, but it would be hard to explain what they are.
I just want to jump in. I want to jump in to say I think you're right on there, Elizabeth. And in fact, I think a lot of times truly cinematic symbols can't be instantly decoded and say that's what this means, because I actually think that is more what literature and poetry do. But because we're photographing things, actually being sort of over-determined and overly prescriptive about it. Mm-hmm. Well, actually, there's a sequence in The Naked Gun 2, I think, where they sort of spoof, this pre-code tendency to do a sex scene by showing the train going through the tunnel or whatever. And in The Naked Gun 2, they do like all the way from like foreplay to climax to, you know, just like everything done through like a series of like 16 visual metaphors. And so and the point is that when it's too obvious what a symbol means, it becomes comical and silly. So I think the elegance is in the mystery, and that becomes the invitation to the audience to kind of engage with this object. And what does that object mean, right?
Yeah, because I think, so much of, sorry, I just want to add one more thing. So much of filmmaking, I think, like, good films are really about embracing that mystery. And I think of something I read about Rembrandt, and, you know, he was this, you know, obviously we all know who he is, but he had this mastery of the, and I'm going to butcher the Italian, but that chiaroscuro, you know, like that contrast between the light and the dark. And he drew your eye to the illuminated areas he wanted you to pay attention to, but he left a lot shrouded in darkness that's up to the viewer to kind of wonder about. One of my favorite directors is the Iranian filmmaker Abbas Kiarostami, and he talked about how a film is never completed until the audience watches it and completes it in their head, you know? And so it's like the film takes on a life of their own in the audience's head, and that is why filmmaking is also such a participatory craft, because it's a collaboration between the director, the DP, the editor, but it's also a collaboration between the director and the audience, and an invitation for the audience to actually participate in the process of the filmmaking by continuing the story in their head.
Well, if I could jump in, I think it's interesting that you say the film is completed in the audience's head, because Tim just blew all our minds. Unraveling yet another meaning of this very interestingly memorable scene from Jurassic Park. So in that sense, if the point is to blow one's mind, the meaning really isn't closed.
To that distinction you're talking about, Alfred Hitchcock put it like this. He said, in narrative, the director is God. In documentaries, God is the director. So in my experience, mainly doing docu-style stuff. That's the way I sort of learned the craft. And so and that is so resonant and so true in my experience. And like you want to start with an idea, and you want to flesh that idea out in a documentary, right? And then what happens is you shoot it, and you get super frustrated because you're not getting exactly what you want. And but what happens along the way, and this is where I think it's so essential to have a deep spiritual life in the pursuit of filmmaking, especially documentary filmmaking, is that you have to be open, because Providence inevitably sets the story the way that you should have it. There's a reconciliation process from production into the edit, and it's about discovering what the film really should be, and that plays out in all these different degrees. But so what I do is I try to find those symbols are very helpful, right? Pre-interviews, you want to kind of discover. You want to discover. Okay, what am I going to be focusing on? What am I going to be looking for? Right? Themes that when you're in the field, when you have the camera running, moments that can be interpreted, so that you can kind of pivot and say, oh, hold on a second. I think this seems like it's important, and not knowing, right? And that takes a lot of courage on the filmmaker's part to kind of especially battle it out with their producer.
Tim, did you have any final thoughts on this?
No.
Oh, well, I have a question then. So you were saying that the totem is the picture of the wife and the husband, and she is in this beautiful pose where, correct me if I'm mistaken, but isn't the head kind of parallel with the heel because of the pose that she's making? So was that intentional to have them sort of level?
No, that's the ballet thing becomes relevant later on in the movie, because the Act 2 of the movie is about the husband discovering her old ballet shoes, and he starts to refurbish them as a gift to her. So that's why that's in there. But I hadn't even thought of the fact that her head and her heel are parallel, so it's not head over heels. I don't even know what to make
Well,
of
no,
that.
because you were just saying that the whole debate is which way is up. You know, like who gets to decide what's higher, and so if the equilibrium seems to be in the middle.
Well, and maybe I can just throw in that this is the great thing about film. You know, what we believe as Catholics is that the world we live in is full of meaning and truly full of like sort of limitless meaning. Like you can plumb the depths of what God is proclaiming to us through nature and the created world forever, and you'll never reach the bottom. And the cool thing about film is that it is a photographic medium, so we can't collapse the meaning of these objects. These objects still, like the chair proclaims its chairness. No matter how much framing we want to put around it, someone may find something else in there that we didn't intend, which is cool. Yeah.
Great. So with that, we'll transition to showing a clip from Sean's recent short doc, To My Father. And so we'll develop some of the thoughts that you shared, Sean, about just the differences of different modes of filmmaking. And so without further ado.
That's what wait.
Was involved in a serious car accident earlier today and is currently in critical condition. The Mesa Police Department is asking the community to keep Chief Kotzer in their thoughts and prayers, respecting families' privacy as they navigate through this challenging situation.
I'm sorry that my father can't be here tonight with me. He was badly injured in a car accident about 2 months ago. We are thankful that he is alive. This has been a very difficult time for me because he's not able to sign to me and our communication is very limited. That accident has changed my life. He told me a few weeks ago that although he could not be with me physically, he would be with me spiritually. I plan to pursue my dream of working in the filmmaking industry. I don't feel like I'm deserting my father because I know he wants me to get the best education possible, and I will take with me his courage. Good luck, class of 1987.
Well, I think, what were we talking about?
Maybe you could just share a bit more about the genesis of the project, and I think it'd be particularly interesting to hear how you thought about making the film for a sign audience or a
Oh yeah, deaf
that'd be
audience.
great. Yeah.
This is the first, a real adventure. I'd never, I didn't have any family members who are deaf, and this is my introduction to the deaf world, deaf culture. I had never made a deaf film before, but I think one of the things going. I think as a Catholic filmmaker, I would propose that we take the craft with a certain level of integrity. Like it's got to like work on all these different levels. And if I'm going to make a film that has to be for a deaf audience and also for a hearing audience, you've got to you got to make it work. So, I'll say that also, like, as a Catholic filmmaker, and I don't call myself that either, by the way, but in terms of a filmmaker who expresses himself as a Catholic and holds herself to those standards, that, like, for example, we had a pre-interview with Troy, and he's telling me the most amazing stories about his dad, like, and I think at a certain level I could only like comprehend how incredible his dad was, in terms of this reference to a principle that I heard, the law of organic transference, that like the founder of the Schoenstatt movement had mentioned, and that, oh my gosh, his dad is reflecting God the Father out of in this beautiful symbolic sacramental way, right, and incarnational way. He's allowing God to work through him, allowing God to provide the grace to raise his son, and a son who he has no idea how to raise, right? And so that was deeply moving. So how do you express that in a documentary? This is not a really sort of a traditional documentary. So I mean, I relied a lot on reenacting, like recreating. I felt like this is for a deaf audience, right? It needs to be really visually rich. I think it would be a real crime if you didn't put special emphasis and time into making this visually rich, and so out of that comes like little things like projection behind him in his interview, to reflect his emotion, and then just being stretched, right? Stretched to figure new things out. Like, as a documentary filmmaker, I had to relearn, like abandon all of these devices that I had leaned on heavily to tell stories. Tell stories without having the interview subject like a talking head the whole time. It gets boring. And so, if I tried to do that with this, it would have been a disaster. I would have gotten
It
kicked
occurs
out
to
of.
me,
Yeah.
you also didn't have the ability to use voiceover, because typically you'd have a talking head and then you'd be able to cut away while he's talking to this stuff.
You're a narrator's deaf.
Right,
Yeah.
you're right.
It's his story, and so typically I would establish the visual narrative right on top of their voices, right, and find ways to keep the film sort of entertaining and flowing and moving, and poetic and using symbols and metaphor. For this, I had to come back to him. The beautiful thing that I discovered is that him signing is absolutely stunningly beautiful, so expressive, so much better than looking like at me talking at you right now. And so that was it's full of symbols. It's rich, and so it took me a while to figure out. Oh, that's going to work. That works even better. It doesn't matter. We can cut back to him all the time. In fact, it works. It works to have him. But then adding little things like the projection stuff in the background helped.
Your commitment to like fighting through I've never done this before. How am I going to solve this problem? And then finding the solution at the end. But that takes commitment and hard work to get through that. And that just brings to mind something that you've been talking a lot about this week, over the past couple of days. I've heard you talking about our. As Catholic filmmakers, we need to commit to loving our audience. That this has to come from, this has to be an act of charity, and that's a really interesting way to frame what we do, I think.
Tim or Elizabeth, do you guys have any similar stories about coming up against what seems to be a roadblock over the course of making a film, and then discovering it actually holds pretty much the key to making the film be what it needs to be?
I feel like filmmaking is just hitting one roadblock after another. It's just a series of
finding a way to make it work.
Right. Yeah, I can't think of. I just felt like there's so many times I've been like in anguish in the process of making a film, because it's like you reach this point where you just want to give up and you feel like it's not working, the edit's not working, you kind of have to throw it all away. We actually made changes to Natalia after the premiere too, and to 3 Songs for Benazir. We premiered and then we had a screening at I think it was Palm Springs, and there was like a moment of black, and the audience thought the film was over. We realized it was a second too long, so we had to trim that. But I think that's the beauty, that you can go back and make these changes. So
I don't have nothing's occurring to me, so yeah.
Flawless. Yeah.
Well, I'll say if you have ideals, and as Catholics, you have to abide. You have to pursue those ideas, or else you're abandoning yourself. I've got the ideals that I strive for and that carry me through the process of a film is to focus on it has to be this balance, this concert of the true, good, and beautiful, right? The story, and then the form constantly needs to be carved out to hold the story appropriately. In that way, I feel like I have to adjust. I have to be able to create new forms and not rely on my old tricks. And,
awesome.
Yeah.
Great. Well, on the note of adjusting, we'll open it up to Q&A from the crowd. And please, no 2-part questions. Just keep it to one. Keep it focused. All right. So hard to... Let's start over here, since I saw this go up. Yeah.
Mine is just an observation. What it makes that so intense is that the narrator is your own internal voice as you're reading. And so you're more intensified in terms of your identification with the characters. And so, I mean, we had to blow our nose in the front row over here. Thank you.
To the lady with the brown sleeve. That's all I can see.
Hi, my question's for Tim. I come from like an animation background myself, and I tend to think of animation more as a medium than a genre. But I know that in the popular imagination, and maybe even more so in like a Catholic, like popular audience, people tend to think of animation as a children's genre, and the implication under that that it is, you know, inherently juvenile or maybe childish rather than striving for the wondrous or childlike quality that we strive for with something that's true, good, and beautiful. So I guess my question is, as like a Catholic animator, how do you answer that question? Is there an audience for like non-child stories at the moment?
Yeah, I think, well, that's the chip that was on the shoulder of everyone at Pixar. And I think that today in 2024, we can really sit back and benefit from the work that they did to convince everybody over their first 15 years of existence that like the best films being made in that stretch of time were definitely the Pixar films. So I think anyone who would put it, and that being said, like not all animation is at that level. But on the bright side, all of the studios have had their one film that felt Pixar quality, in my opinion. How to Train Your Dragon out of DreamWorks, and I love Despicable Me out of Illumination. I think it's incredibly beautiful. Actually makes me cry. It's about fatherhood, so of course it will. But so I think that I think you know there's at least now there's proof in the pudding for the theory. The proof is in the pudding. We can prove that it's true that animation can do more. I think the challenge, though, is that the economics of animation require a huge audience. So the biggest audience is the 4-quadrant audience: male, female, young, old. That's the 4-quadrant audience. And so that's what we always, at the studio level, are always trying to do. But there are a lot of examples. Every year, at least 1 or 2 movies is nominated for an Oscar is some weird, like, Asian or European film that not a lot of people saw, but was animated and got made. And I just think, yeah, there's an audience. It's smaller, though. And so those movies will also always be lower budget, you know. But yeah, I think I would say that even the mainstream 4-quadrant sandbox has expanded, like Into the Spider-Verse, it like sort of blew the roof off of what the look of the film could be. And now if you're making something that looks like pre-Spider-Verse, you're lame, you know? Everything now looks painterly or something. So, and maybe that's bad in its own way because it's becoming a constraint. But yeah, I think we're still discovering the possibilities of the art form, and I think the audience is coming along with us for a lot of that.
Let's see, the lady in the purple sweater here, and then we'll go to the gentleman with the red tie. It's like Mr. Murder Mystery names. Yeah.
Yes. What is it with like the something in the library?
Yeah, right. It was the butler.
Right. I'm just curious about fundraising. Just how do you raise money and how do you fund your projects?
If you want to just pass it back.
Well, it's a quick answer. You write that up as client work, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Go ahead.
For me, a lot of it's been most of my career is client work, getting commissioned, and I am just now at a point where I am trying to raise. I'm gonna for several films. So I also too want to hear the answer to these questions.
Yeah, I mean, most of my career prior to Sycamore Studios has been working at the studios, and again, the nut has been cracked there. They're paying me to come make their film, and that, you know, therein lies the sort of the frustration because it's not my film, it's theirs. With Sycamore Studios, we've spent a year raising investment capital, just, you know, meeting lots of people who like the mission and you know, can see their way to investing in film, which is it's a risky investment, but on the other hand, it's also it's a business. It makes money, so there are ways to do it. You know, the trick here is that once you've established a track record, everything becomes easier. So it's very hard to do it for the first time, right?
Did you get paid for that Howard
Oh yeah, thanks for reminding. Yeah, I did do the Hallow Super Bowl commercial, and yeah, Hallow paid us to do that out of their marketing budget. And maybe I should say no more about that. But yeah, no, wait, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard. We got through production on all of our films without any funding. I just took a lot of other odd jobs in between, which is why it just takes so long to make a film. Natalia was a film I didn't even seek funding for, because grants, it's like, with a film like this, like, how am I gonna position that? Like, it's really tricky. So I just knew that it was happening within a window of time, and I have my own equipment, I shoot, I just able to fly out there in between other jobs that I take. So it's not the ideal method, but I'm still trying to figure that out.
I will say that what I'm coming to terms with, and I think the correct strategy, if you don't have like a top-down answer, is you got to build your audience, and I think we have, in sort of our digital environment, we have ways to do that. And I think the approach that I'm actually working on a project with Lauren, and we're going to like create short docs and short animations that will be disseminated through social channels, right? And then sort of slowly build that audience, so that then you can say like, look, I got all these people, right? And that equals money.
Great. We'll take the next question.
Okay. I have a question about audiences. So Sean had talked about loving your audience, which I take to be your real audience. I've heard some people talk about an ideal audience, somebody who you'd want to please when making a work of art. Like sometimes it's just a particular person. Do you guys have one of those when you're making art, somebody you'd want to please?
I've absolutely lived this, so I'll jump right in. Head Over Heels was the first. Okay, so I could call it my debut short, but I'd made a lot of things, and you saw my that little freeze frame of The Order of Kronos, the kung fu movie I made in high school, and all of the other films involved killing people, and that was like where my taste lay for most of my early 20s. I loved the Coen Brothers. I loved Quentin Tarantino. I thought if no one's like at risk of death, like where's the fun? And when I made Head Over Heels, I had my mom and my girlfriend, now my wife, in mind, and that really changed. I really believe that who you're making the film for changes who you are as a filmmaker, and the success I enjoyed not making movies for myself has convinced me I should never do that again.
I think for me, I don't think I focus in on like one person. I think it's just the collection of people, and that I want to give something to, right? That third ideal is also like that I didn't mention was like I don't want to do anything if I'm not contributing anything to the cultural dialogue, anything new and fresh, important perspective. So in that regard, I see as like participating in the cultural dialogue out of love, like making something, sacrificing, and laboring on something to make a valid contribution.
Yeah, I think it's a good question. I think for me, what the most important feedback will come from the people who are in the film. I want to share the cut with the people, like for example, in 3 Songs for Benazir, before the film was premiered, we screened it with Shaista and Benazir and saw how they felt about it and made sure everything was okay with them. And with Natalia too, it was like the best feedback I had was that all the nuns in the monastery really liked the film and that they saw themselves in it. And like, if I had made a film that they couldn't see themselves in it, that film was a failure, like regardless of if it's praised by audiences around the world. If they can't see themselves in it, it's not true, so.
Great. Let's show some love to this side of the room. Yeah, right in the front.
Hello, I take my nephews to old movies and I have to banish their phones. I cannot compete with TikTok even if I have Hitchcock. Once the phones are banished, though, after great titanic struggles and Herculean labors, they actually will come up to me and go, "Uncle Ryan, this is a really good movie." I mean, that was my nephew Austin to Moonstruck. He enjoyed Moonstruck, so that was a success. If I can get a 5-year-old interested in Rear Window and the 14-year-old as well, I mean, that's pretty good. Lots of candy has to bribe them. But what I've noticed is that their interest is in a whole different form of media than what I grew up with. I grew up with watching Nickelodeon, Cartoon Network, and then eventually moving on to like eventually the Criterion Channel or something like that. And raised in a love of movies, Tarantino, Coen Brothers especially. That to them is totally a foreign language, totally an old world. It's like they're immigrants to this new one. I'm wondering, however, as the industry is contracting, there could be, among people like them, things that we're not able to foresee at the moment, which is a rising generation of people who would find using new media, AI, YouTube, whatever is the thing that's going to replace TikTok, to make films in some form or another, maybe on a lower budget, but they find things that can be more smaller scale, kind of like the found footage, something that can be, they come up with different tricks to basically do it without the big studio money. What are the chances of something like this happening organically at all, or with new technology that's sort of replacing what I love, which is the old show business?
I have seen. I watched a feature on YouTube last year, which was a first for me, and so that it is happening. Like there are people doing no budget work that's even feature length on YouTube, and then who among us has not listened to like a 3-hour episode of, I don't know, Joe Rogan or whatever. So there is long form content that like Gen Z can pay attention to. So I don't buy into the shorter attention span. I think like the abandonment of the movies has a lot to do with the movies abandoning the audience a little. Maybe that's a little pat, but I guess what I mean is like even I'm bored of movies, and that's why I watched this thing on YouTube, because it was like actually promised to be kind of interesting, where I felt like I'd kind of seen it before with a lot of other projects. Does anyone else have something to say about like the indie world?
Indie world?
Like the no budget, nothing.
Oh, well, I just want to say I am also like, I have friends who are telling me their kids don't like anything over like they don't like narrative films because they're sort of just on their screens the whole time. So it's deeply troubling. I'm wondering because narrative is just this essential element to our humanity, right? Like how are they? How is just grabbing at these little tiny sort of meaningless things oftentimes, right? How is that developing the narrative? How are they sort of integrating the information and stories in their life? But I also think they're going to do it, right? It's happening. I don't doubt that it's happening, and that they're figuring out with anything. I mean, you look at history, like they're going to figure it out, and they're going to develop new forms, right?
That's great. So we have a 4-quadrant audience, and we'll take our last question from that side of the room. And yes, I saw this hand first.
My question is for Elizabeth and Sean. As documentarians, how do you approach respecting the incomplete story of your subject while also telling a story about them?
Yeah, that's a good question and a hard one. I think documentary, it's a bit like a fiction novel in the sense that you're just dropped into the character's life in the middle. Like there's a lot that came before the film, a lot that comes after, a lot that the film can never do. And I think that's just part of the beauty of films in general, that there is this ambiguity, and again, that it's like the audience is allowed, like it gives the audience the space to imagine what could happen going forward rather than just tell them what's going to happen, you know?
I think, isn't everything incomplete? I don't know. So
well, you talked about not getting what you want, right? So that indicates like it's like, why don't you just say it like this? That's what I really want for the right. Like we all have that impulse, right? So there is that thing where you're not getting what you think is going to fit.
Okay, right. So then I think it's like it's the spiritual life, right? Like you've got to come to terms with if I'm supposed to be making this project, there has to be a way to craft it, to finish it, right? And then you have to endure that, right? You've just got to sort of labor over it until it's revealed.
Yeah, it just made me think about something else. I think it was Flannery O'Connor's The Habit of Being, her collection of letters. And it's been a really long time since I read that, so I could be misremembering this. But what I remember is that it ends like on an unfinished sentence. And they intentionally, the editors chose to do that because it's like life doesn't wrap up neatly. It doesn't always have a period at the end, and her life was cut short in the words of the world, right? And so I think that decision really actually influenced a lot of my filmmaking, because actually I've been told by a few people like, oh, your endings are really abrupt in your films. But I think for me, like that just reflects part of what I've seen to be true about life.
I'm very tempted to wrap it there, I have to say. But perhaps in the last 30 seconds, any final words or great commissions from our panelists? It also is the end of the programmed part of the conference, so no pressure. No, great. All right, awesome. Well, we do have one final slide in the spirit of maybe incompleteness.
So this panel came together, at least in part, from the very spirited advocacy of Mary Cass, who works with the Windwriter Foundation. They go every year, they bring a group of Christian students and just Christian community members to the Sundance Film Festival, and they've become the largest single audience block at Sundance, which is really interesting that like the biggest laughs, the biggest applauses are coming from groups of Christians that Windwriter brings there. So it's a very influential group. Mary was able to swing a free subscription or access, I don't really know what it is, but if you scan the QR code, you'll get access to their online platform. Head Over Heels and To My Father are both on their platform, as well as other films that they try to gather from filmmakers like us for audiences like you. So they just wanted to offer this gift to the conference.
Great. And with that, if we could have a round of applause for our panelists and for our organizers in the back.